Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Well Beyond the Arc. I'm Manoli,
And I'm Montana.
and we have a very special episode for you all today. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to dive into the GOAT debate, the greatest of all time. Even busted out my formal wear for the occasion, Montana.
Oh yeah, me too a little bit. Here we go.
How you holding up, buddy? You doing all right?
For sure, doing great.
All right. Well, let's dive in. But before we do, we'll go through our housekeeping items first. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the Yankee and the Brit Sports Group. If you're watching us on YouTube, just hit that bottom left-hand thumbs up for us. Hopefully, you are joining us on YouTube. You can also catch us on Spotify and iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. Just you can catch us everywhere. We're not going anywhere. You can find us. We thank you all again for joining us. But before we get into the GOAT debate, a bit of sad news. I think everyone's heard by now about the passing of Boston Celtics and NBA legend Bill Russell over the weekend on Sunday, actually. Russell was an 11-time NBA champion, more rings than fingers, 5-time league MVP, 2-time NCAA champion, member of the 1956 gold medal U.S. men's Olympic basketball team, and also, most of you remember, a civil rights activist as well. So one of the most respected players and respected men in the history of the game. Definitely be missed, having passed at the age of 88. Rest in peace, Mr. Bill Russell. May your memory be eternal. All right, Montana, let's dive in. Bill Russell's one of the people that a lot of people bring up in their top 10, top 15. Uh, Arguably the greatest winner of all time. But let's talk about what is going into the criteria of who can be considered the greatest basketball player of all time. What are the attributes that person has to be? So when I say the GOAT, what does that look like for you?
I mean, honestly, I think that the biggest mistake people make when we look at the GOAT debate is they look at one side of it. They look at accolades or they look at statistics. I think you have to look at both. And the good news is there are so many players that have both the accolades and the statistics that there are plenty of players that we could list off just right now. But I think the biggest mistake people make is they just look at one side of it. And I think that's why some of those takes, even some of those big takes from those guys up top, those talking heads, some of those takes are very questionable. Arguably, those are the most questionable because a lot of times they'll only look at one side of it. A lot of those people you see on those debate shows or those sports shows, those daily shows, for example, Undisputed, it's never anything other than Michael or LeBron. And I'm be honest, they're definitely the two that people consider when they're talking about the GOAT, but a lot of those guys only focus in on two players, and there's definitely a couple other names I think that are at least up there in the mix. So I think the two biggest mistakes that especially the talking heads make is one, only focusing on one side, either if that be accolades or statistics, and two, only focusing on two guys. So I think that you have to look at it and from a broader spectrum, different eras, different situations, different, there's a lot of different factors. So I just think factoring in all of those pieces is the only way to really see who the real GOAT is.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I'll even break it down a little bit further into actual characteristics and a skill set. I completely agree. It's got to be a combination of accolades, awards, and statistics. And a lot of times, statistics can be taken out of context, right? And yes, guys, keep the comments coming. As a reminder, keep the comments coming. See how quickly you can crack myself and Montana up here at the bottom. But anyway, uh, I wrote a whole blog on this too. But some of the attributes I think a GOAT should have. It shouldn't be playing on one side of the court either. You got to be great on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. Got to be a type of player that can do everything on the basketball court, right? We'll talk about maybe the most dominant player, the best shooters we've already talked about, best defender, best specialist here and there, but to me the greatest of all time has to be able to do everything on the basketball court. You mentioned accolades. Winning's got to be a part of that. You can't just be a stat compiler. You got to have rings. You got to have won MVP awards, Finals MVP awards, Defensive Player of the Year awards, scoring championships, assists, leading the league in assists, leading the rebound, something. you got to have a resume other than, okay, well, a ring. I mean, Robert Ory has about 7 rings, but we're not considering him. At least I'm not in the GOAT conversation, for example. Um, were there any rule changes implemented in the game of basketball because of them? Is the game different because of them, either on a marketing scale or the way the game is played scale? And one of especially here lately, Stephen Curry is one of those guys that has changed the game because guys made shooting cool, especially shooting from well beyond the arc. See what I did there, Montana? And then also, last but not least, well, two things. I'm sorry. One, making their teammates better, at least having the ability to make teammates better, right? Making those around them and being able to lift them up to be able to win and get to that next level. And last thing, when the game is on the line and it's winning time, will your guy come up in the clutch? Is he a clutch player? And who's the more clutch player than some of the other guys that you're debating? So to me, those are the characteristics of someone that needs to be that has to be considered when you're talking about the greatest of all time.
And I definitely agree. I think that we both mentioned it. They don't look at enough of the, all of it together. And like you said, one of the biggest things I don't think we look at is the rule changes. The league is so much different. We look at a player, obviously, RIP, we already mentioned him, Bill Russell. I mean, that man was getting 50 plus rebounds a game in certain games, like it was nothing. There were all of the, they didn't have a 3-point line. The fouls were different. Everything was so much different that you see a player like that. There is no NBA player, I don't care how elite they are, no one is averaging 50 rebounds a game or even getting a 50 rebound game nowadays.
No way.
First of all, the minutes are everything's different. The way people play the game, the game's faster, so everything's different. So looking at the GOAT and just looking at one player in a certain era and not looking at it from a broader picture, some people think there's a GOAT in each era. That I'm not opposed to looking at it in that way. I think there definitely is a player that's better than all the rest, but I think you can also look at it by era because of just how different each era of the NBA is.
Sure. And we're never going to get the chance. I mean, granted, you can do it on NBA 2K, but in real life, we're never going to see Jerry West take on Michael Jordan. You're never going to see LeBron James go up against Larry Bird. You're not going to see Bill Russell or Wilt Chamberlain go up against Shaq or Tim Duncan or some of the other, and Hakeem Olajuwon. You're not going to see Steph Curry going up against Bob Cousy. Not that those guys are a comp, but just to give you an idea of, you're not going to mix eras, right? And there very well could be guys that you can consider, okay, this guy was the greatest of his era, right? And some of the guys that we're going to be mentioning, Michael Jordan, probably the best of his era. LeBron James, probably the best of his era, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a great point you brought up here. A lot of kind of the genesis of why we wanted to do this debate is it's the heaviest, maybe that's not the right word, it's the most debated sports subject today by far. And usually the conversation is, well, is it Michael Jordan or LeBron James? It's usually a two-man race, and a lot of that has to do with the media coverage over the last 40 years of the NBA. And most people just remember Michael Jordan and or LeBron James. But let's open up the conversation because I don't think those are the only two guys that can be considered as the greatest of all time, at least getting some votes, if you will. Not saying that those are going to be our picks, but who else should be, in your opinion, Montana, included in consideration for the greatest of all time? We got a couple comments in here, but what say you?
So I would say looking at an all-around player, because again, if we break it down piece by piece, the greatest shooter of all time is Stephen Curry. That there's no debating that. Maybe some people would still debate that, but when we look at a player overall, just addressing one of our Steph Curry comments, personally, I do not see Curry. I see Curry as finishing a top 20 player all time when it's all said and done, but I do not see him being in the GOAT conversation ever as a whole. I think that he is the greatest shooter of all time, and he's going to go down as one of the winningest point guards of all time and just one of the winningest guards of all time. But looking at it piece by piece, I'm going to knock him out of any consideration right off the bat. Again, we talked about Bill Russell. 11 championships. He's a champion as a coach. He's a champion as a player. He was just a huge part of pop culture in every era since he played in the NBA. He has been huge since. Bill Russell's dominance has still continued since he retired, which has been so many years ago, before I was even anywhere close to being born. So he's been a legend and he's been an icon but I don't see him as a GOAT either. A player that I can see in that conversation from that time would be Wilt Chamberlain. I really can see Wilt Chamberlain being in the conversation because of how gifted he was as a player. We look at his 100-point game. That was huge. No one is ever going to get that again. I really, that's another record that I do not see changing ever. So, Wilt Chamberlain, he had that, championship wise, didn't have a lot of success. He had some success. He's not a player that didn't have any championship success, but he made it more times than he won. We've seen that plenty of times. But I'd put Wilt Chamberlain in the discussion. But if I'm going to give one player that I really think should be in the conversation, that's going to be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That
Great
man
call.
is the
Great call.
most. He's not underrated. He's definitely, he's got the scoring record to this day. That's probably going to change with the next few seasons. That man is a legend. But the thing that detracts me from saying he's the overall GOAT is he was an overall player. He had a lot of good, he could both sides of the ball. He was a beast, and he was, I would say, ahead of his time. But he lacked a game that was out. We see these centers nowadays that are, putting up those threes and having, more success from, a little bit of range. And he was never that guy. He's the all-time leading 3 points or leading scorer, and he made not more than, did he make 1 3, 2 threes? He did not make that many threes. It was all, up close, a couple mid-range, with that sky hook. But for the most part, he didn't have a game that went beyond mid-range. So that kind of knocks him out because his game wasn't as complete as a LeBron James or a Kobe Bryant or even a Michael Jordan for that matter. So, complete game on the offensive side, Kareem lacked certain aspects, but on the defensive side, he had it all down. That man could get down the court like it was nothing. Even his last few years, he was as quick as ever. So, he really is up there for me. The only thing that detracts it for me and for some other people might be his lack of offensive game. He definitely lacks more consistency and, more different aspects than like a LeBron James or even a Kobe Bryant. So I think that might be what detracts some people. But for the most part, 6 championships, 6 MVPs,
Yeah.
20 plus seasons, success on more than one organization. Most players only dream of winning 1 to 3 championships on one team. He won 6. Now, granted, 5 of those were from the Lakers, but he still got the Bucks their first one, and he was
Yes, he did.
super. People forget how good that man was on the Bucks. Really, that was some of his best years when he played for the Bucks. So Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is up there for me. Obviously, I said Wilt Chamberlain kind of makes a push, but those two guys I think are maybe less talked about in that GOAT debate. Especially Kareem is very much. I think he needs to be talked about more.
I agree, and I think a lot of folks are almost forgetting and dismissing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's career. He's still currently the NBA's all-time leading scorer, 38,387 points. We think LeBron James is going to beat that at some point next season. I agree with a lot of the names that you said. I broke it down a little differently. I think that, we talked about the late Bill Russell. He's got to be the greatest winner in NBA history, right? You can even argue best team player in NBA history because he wasn't called on to score. He scored probably about around 20 points a game. But you mentioned his rebounding. He was one of the fiercest defensive players of his era. They didn't even count block shots back when Bill Russell played. Imagine how many blocks he would have had if you went back and counted as an actual statistic that Bill Russell had. Hakeem Olajuwon's the all-time leader in NBA history, but if they were counting it, it'd definitely be Bill Russell. Put him down as arguably the best defender for that reason, right? You have the best statistics in NBA history. You said it yourself, don't just measure accolades and statistics individually. You got to put them together. LeBron James is probably going to be have the best statistical career in NBA history, right? Best scorer in NBA history, you can say Wilt, you can see Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but Michael Jordan still has the highest points per game average of anyone in NBA history. So I put Michael Jordan as the best scorer in NBA history. Best shooter, we already talked about Steph Curry and the way he's changed the game. Now, for a lot of the reasons you said, I don't put him as above any of those guys. He's definitely in the conversation, don't get me wrong, but while his defense has improved, probably will never see Stephen Curry on an all defensive team or one defensive player of the year, right? He's done some of the things that some of those other guys have done, lead the league in scoring, MVPs, championships, finally got his finals MVP. But has he done that more than the other guys that we mentioned? No. Most dominant in NBA history, I put it as a tie between Wilt Chamberlain and Shaquille O'Neal. If I had to give the edge to someone, I'd give it to Wilt because they expanded the paint because of Wilt Chamberlain. He was getting so deep, it just wasn't fair for Wilt Chamberlain, right? Um, and one guy that we haven't mentioned too much about is Kobe Bean Bryant. Now, a lot of people dismiss Kobe Bryant as the GOAT because, well, he won his first 3 rings with Shaq, and Shaq's arguably the most dominant player in NBA history. But he did win 2 more without Shaq. Granted, he had Pau Gasol and a bevy of other great good players around him, including Ron Artest, Derek Fisher, guys of that nature, right? And Andrew Bynum had a borderline all-star season or 2 with the Lakers that second go-around. But Kobe Bryant was basically a Michael Jordan clone and maybe even took it up to a different level. As far as the toughest shot maker in NBA history, I got to give it to Kobe Bryant because some of those shots that he took, granted, mid-range fadeaways with 3 guys in his face, or would go up and drive against 3 or 4 guys and still get him to go and get and ones. Kobe Bryant, for me, toughest shot maker in NBA history. I just don't know if I put any of those guys above the 2 guys that are being debated heavily today in Michael Jordan, LeBron James, for me. But I think all of those guys should have some sort of vote. Yes, our shooter is not just mid-range shooter, but yeah, 3-point shooter, best 3-point shooter of all time debate. The great question, Nick. But yeah, I mean, all those guys should have a seat at the table when you're talking about the GOAT. But then there's one tier, and then there's actually that tier between those 2 guys that we're going to get into in a little bit. So I don't know if we missed anybody, Montana. I think we covered most of the guys that we should, that, in our bucket there of outside of the 2 main guys.
I would say the only 2 other players that I would throw around in that mix would be Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. I
Oh,
think those
of
2
course,
guys
of
they're in the
course.
conversation. The only thing with them is also obviously, Magic Johnson. I'm not going to say a lot of his success was because he played with Kareem, but I'm going to give a little bit more of that pull in that GOAT conversation between Magic and Kareem to Kareem, just because of that man owned before we got to the mid late 90s 2000s. That guy had almost all of those records, with he had so many. Kareem, the reason Kareem is I think a tier above some of these guys we've talked about is because he had so many records. He did so much statistically and with accolades. So I'm going to give him that pull above Magic. But Larry Bird, I mean, that man was around for the longest time, and he was great up until he retired. So we've got to throw his name out there. He's definitely in my top 10 players all time. But again, we've got these players, then we've got the top few guys up top. So Larry Bird and
Good
Magic
call.
definitely aren't those top 2, but I would say Larry Bird and Magic, we have to shout him out at least a little bit in this segment.
Absolutely. I think I committed a basketball sin by forgetting about Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. 2 guys that in some ways were mirror images of each other in the 80s, always seemed to square off against each other in the finals in the 80s. Arguably were the guys that saved the NBA. You wouldn't have that big sonic boom takeoff of NBA world marketing of Michael Jordan and then later on Kobe Bryant and LeBron James if it wasn't for Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. And those 2 guys hit all the criteria that we're hitting, that we talked about, being all around players, making their teams better, winning, um, doing it both ends of the court. Although I don't know if you consider Magic Johnson as elite defender, but good team defender, I guess, right? But did they do it as much as some of the other guys that we're going to be mentioning here in a little bit? We shall see. Well, we're going to get into our favorite game here a little earlier than usual. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another edition of NBA Player Or. Those loyal followers of our Well Beyond the Arc know how the game is played, but I'm going to go through the rules and how the game is played anyway. Every week, I give Montana the name of 5 individuals, and he needs to tell me whether or not they are a current or former NBA player or someone from a different profession. Last week, we had a little bit of a Greek flavor on the program by Montana guessing whether or not that person was a former NBA player or Greek singer. And Montana, to his credit, went 4 for 5. That second 5 for 5 is still eluding him. Maybe this is the week. Maybe it's not. We'll see. But Montana, how confident you feeling today?
I'm going 5 for 5. I already know.
You can't get much more confident than that, folks. Today's topic, don't worry, I'm not going on another ethnic group singer for you. Today's topic, and I don't know how much you are into the culinary arts, Montana, how much you love food, but today's topic is NBA player or famous celebrity chef.
I might do all right. I feel kind of
Okay.
confident about this one, actually. This might be my one I go 5 for 5 in. No
Okay.
problem.
Okay. Well, just as a reminder, every time I ask Montana whether or not it's an NBA player or someone else, if Montana gets the question right, you will hear the sound.
Victory!
Thank you, Johnny Drama. And if Montana gets it incorrect, you will hear this sound. And according to Montana, we will not hear that sound today. So,
not at all.
All right, without further ado, let's get right into it. Name number one. Montana, is this an NBA player or the name of a famous celebrity chef? The name is Alton Brown.
Celebrity
Alton.
chef.
Boom.
Victory!
That's either the quickest or second quickest you ever answered a question here on NBA player or. And if that's any indication, folks, he might go 5 for 5 tonight. We'll see. All right. Name number two. Is this an NBA player or famous celebrity chef? The name is Kenrick Williams.
I'm going to go with basketball player.
Victory!
That would be a good choice, sir. Kenrick Williams, a current NBA player. I think that might be the first current NBA player we've had in the contest here. Currently with the Oklahoma City Thunder, also played with the New Orleans Pelicans, has averaged 6.5 points per game in his brief career, 200 career games. Alton Brown, also creator of Food Network's Good Eats. We forgot to mention that because Montana answered it so quickly. I forgot that I probably should say who the hell that guy is. But he's not an NBA player, and this is an NBA podcast, so who cares? All right. Name number three. Montana, is this gentleman an NBA player or famous celebrity chef? The name is Vitali Potapanko. Vitali Potapanko.
Wow, this one's a little tricky. I'm going to go with NBA player.
Victory!
You would be correct. Vitali Potapanko played in the NBA from 1996 to 2007 with a number of teams, including the Cleveland Cavaliers, Boston Celtics, Seattle Supersonics, Sacramento Kings. He too averaged a career average of 6.5 points per game, but did it over 610 games. All right, 3 for 3. The tension in
The
the
pressure's on. Whew. All
yes.
right.
Yes. Name number four. Is this individual an NBA player or famous celebrity chef? The name is Aaron Sanchez. Aaron Sanchez.
I'm going to go with celebrity chef.
Victory!
He's 4 for 4, everybody. Aaron Hernandez. Aaron Hernandez. That's a Freudian slip. Put that to the blooper reel. Aaron Sanchez. Famous Mexican-American celebrity chef, current host of Master Chef and Master Chef Junior. All right. Whew. 4 for 4. You got me flustered on that one, Montana. I flustered myself. All right. Will he do it, folks? Will he get that 5 for 5? Is this an NBA player or celebrity chef, Montana? The name is John Crotty. John Crotty.
Oh my gosh. I could go either way on this one, but I'm going to go with chef.
Oh,
It's worse than going 0 for 5. Oh, I'd rather go 0 for 5 than, oh my god. 2 weeks in a row, but I'm shocked I got 4 out of 5 last week.
Hey, well, we got to go through who John Crotty is. Obviously, he is an NBA player. Played in the NBA from 1992 to 2003. name him to the old pest team. He played 477 career games with the Utah Jazz, Detroit Pistons, Cleveland Cavaliers, Miami Heat, Portland Trail Blazers, Seattle Supersonics, Denver Nuggets. Yeah. Not going to lie, everybody. I was kind of looking at my hat with the NBA logo, hoping Montana would catch it, but I tried to cheat. We couldn't do it. But normally we don't do that because we are a reputable program here on the internet. But anyway, Montana, great job. Another 4 for 5, 2 weeks in a row. That brings your total to 46 of 65.
I'll take it.
Still way up than he is down. yeah, Brain Smoke. I hit him with Aaron Hernandez.
That's why I missed the last one. That's because you threw me off so much with that one.
It's my fault. It's all my fault. And you know what? I blame Aaron Hernandez for this miss of 5 for 5. All right, I think we need to get our bearings reset for a second. So we'll pause here for a word from the Yankee and the Brit.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Jay from Yankee and the Brit telling you to come over and check out our shows. The Yankee and the Brit Sports Talk, Well Beyond the Arc, the Markout Podcast, Flagrant and Foul, Real Talk with Jay, and MMA Underground Weekly at YouTube.com/The Yankee and the Brit. Deuces.
I can't believe I said Aaron Hernandez. Man. Yeah, I blamed Aaron Hernandez, Ghost. You're right. You're 100% right. Well, we went through a number of guys who should be in the GOAT conversation, but a lot of what I see these days, I'm sure, Montana, you hear it, talking heads talk about all the time, is two guys. It's LeBron James and Michael Jordan. It seems like those are the only two guys that can be in the GOAT debate. A lot of guys passionately argue this. I hear some of the chats I see, the phrase facts over feelings all the time. So we're going to sit here and provide the facts, but we're going to make an argument for both LeBron James as the GOAT and Michael Jordan as the GOAT. And then we'll close with both Montana and I giving our individual picks. We want to give at least half the show here because our picks might not be LeBron James or Michael Jordan. It might be somebody else. Who knows? You'll just have to stick around and with us and find out. But Montana, let's make the argument that LeBron James is the greatest player of all time. Let's go through his resume. If someone was to say LeBron James is the greatest of all time, why would somebody say that?
So if we talk about a player that's achieved both statistics and accolades, that's LeBron James. I think that LeBron James, to me, if I'm trying to look at him versus Michael Jordan, I think that statistically, to me, he is a little bit more statistically great than Michael Jordan. A big thing with that is LeBron's game is really all around. And that's not saying Michael Jordan's wasn't all around. Obviously, he was an animal on both sides of the ball. He was the defensive player of the year. He was great on both sides of the ball. But LeBron has been more consistent. We kind of saw Michael Jordan not fall off, but his defense wasn't as great as it was earlier, later versus earlier, his defense fell off. LeBron James has been battling some injuries his last few seasons. This last season, we had kind of saw LeBron's defense fall off just a little bit. But for the most part, LeBron has been consistent on both sides of the ball his whole career. So consistency for LeBron is a huge argument. A four-time champion. But the problem with those four-time champion, he also has lost more than he has won when it comes to the finals. And people don't like how that looks. And I don't blame them. His finals record doesn't look great, but every single time LeBron James has been in the playoffs, he has gone crazy. It doesn't matter if he's out in the first round like he was his last go-round in the playoffs against the Suns, or if they make it to the finals and then they lose like those plenty of lost seasons, with those Warriors versus Cavs when the Cavs would dominate the regular season, show up, see Kevin Durant, all those guys, and didn't have enough to throw at them. So, but LeBron James, between all of that, whether it's been a season even like last season, he was averaging so much for the age he is and the league that we are at now. The fact that he could average that still, and arguably his offense is actually starting to pick up. We see him shooting more threes and making more threes. We see him with more mid-range. He's always had that, but LeBron is kind of an all-around guy in my opinion. And that's not saying a player like Michael Jordan isn't great on defense and isn't great. We've seen him drill those really clutch threes. We've seen Jordan do that. But I think when we talk about the all-around player, I think I give that to LeBron. And it's not just statistically. We've also seen him make a lot of those teams that aren't great. We have seen him take a team. This is what kind of really pushes it for me. And it's not even really a statistic as much as it's just something you can look at and see. I mean, it's a record thing. The Cavs, LeBron's last season, made it to the blew through the regular season, even despite that roster lacking so much depth. I mean, that it was like LeBron and then a bunch of role players. That is exactly what that team was. LeBron leaves that team and they only won 20 games the next season. And it was the exact same team almost, just without LeBron. The impact LeBron has on teams is what really sets him apart from Michael Jordan, in my opinion. And that's not to say Michael Jordan doesn't have a good impact on teams. I mean, 6 championships looks pretty damn good if you ask me. 6 for 6 is pretty solid. But LeBron makes these teams that aren't great. And we have seen him pull ridiculous, not even 8th seed teams to the playoffs. His first time as a Cav making the finals, it was with a bunch of guys that I don't think I could sit here and tell you who the other guys on his team were. I'd have to Google almost every single one of those names. So the greatness of LeBron is that. The greatness of LeBron is what he has done for those teams that shouldn't even be in the conversation of teams that are great. He has made not great teams great. And so, in my opinion, that's what sets him apart is his consistency and his efficiency on both sides of the ball, and then also just how great of an impact he has. Because, again, we have seen him make those not great teams great. Even last season, he was the highlight of that Lakers team. And he got so heavily criticized for going out and shooting as much as he was and scoring as much as he was. And they said that he was just putting up all those points to try to, pass Kareem. But what else were they going to do? They weren't going to win. AD was out. The only way they had a chance in any of those games was if LeBron was on the court. So, he's very heavily criticized, but his greatness is so much overshadowed by that criticism that I just think he doesn't get a fair overview of everything he has done great, because that man has done almost everything you can want to do in the NBA. And the only thing that he has left to do is play a game with his son, play a season or two with his son, and then he's done it all. So LeBron James has definitely done almost everything you can want to do as an NBA player, if not more. So I think his greatness is more than just winning championships. I think his greatness spreads out, and that's why I think the talking heads don't look at that. We'll hear Skip Bayless just say, look at his finals record. Look at this. I mean, Skip Bayless will say anything bad about LeBron. He'll criticize what LeBron had for breakfast in the morning. Let's just be honest. Skip Bayless is getting paid. Most of what he is just, I love the Cowboys, I hate LeBron. That's what that man is. So, but no. So I don't think the talking heads I don't think the talking heads give him enough credit, and I don't think a lot of people give LeBron the credit he deserves for the greatness that he has made a lot of other players look like they have when they do not. He has made players look. He made Larry Nance look pretty damn good. He made Jordan Clarkson look pretty. He's made a lot of players look good. So the only player he can't seem to make look good is Russell Westbrook, but maybe that'll change. So I think my biggest argument for him is his consistency and his efficiency and just the greatness that he has given a bunch of players and a bunch of teams and organizations in his time in the league.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with LeBron James, obviously. And, I'm going to make my arguments for LeBron and Michael Jordan here. I'm going to hold my criticisms and my arguments on, assuming that's who I pick here at the end. But I'm just going to give my arguments for LeBron James here. And the guy has put a career stat line together like no one in the history of the NBA. By the time his career is done, he could be a guy with 40,000 career points, 10,000 plus career rebounds, and 10,000 career assists. That is insane. No one's gotten 10,000 career rebounds and 10,000 career assists being the same player. No one's done that. He's played for, I think he's going into his 20th season, if I'm not mistaken. Guy's still able to be one of the top players in the NBA, now, granted, he came straight out of high school, but speaking of that, he's probably the most hyped player to come into the NBA, high school or college ever, especially out of high school, and probably the most productive high school player in his rookie year, if you will, going from high school, transitioning straight into the NBA. Won the Rookie of the Year award. Granted, some can argue that he stole that Rookie of the Year award winner from Carmelo Anthony, but that's a different story. He's taken 3 different franchises to NBA championships, that being the Miami Heat, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm going to go a step back. He took the Cleveland Cavaliers of all teams in professional sports and led them to an NBA championship. Cleveland hadn't won anything since the 60s. And they've gotten, I mean, the Indians have gotten to the World Series. The Browns, don't even get me started with the Cleveland Browns. That's a different story for a different type of show. But the fact that LeBron James took a Cleveland sports team to an NBA title, he'll always be a legend, especially in Cleveland, just for that, right? He's had some very, very efficient seasons, especially with his years with the Miami Heat, where he was part of the big three there with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. Some high field goal percentage seasons. He's been able to improve facets of his game, primarily three-point shooting along the way. He's been a great defender. He's been great on the offensive side. One of the highest basketball IQs in the history of the game. Makes his teammates better, that's for sure. Will make the right play. Doesn't force up a lot of bad shots. He'll look to pass to an open teammate rather than put up some shots. But again, that's a different argument for another time. And yeah, he took a 2007 Cleveland Cavaliers team to the NBA Finals. I can name a few guys from that squad, but that's just because I'm a basketball junkie. I'm sick in the head like that. He also took, I believe it was a 2019 or is it 2018 Cavs? His last year with the Cavs, I think it was 2018 Cavs. Didn't really have much other star power. I mean, he had a crazy run to the NBA Finals, only to lose to the Golden State Warriors, but they were outmatched there. Probably the most athletic player that we've ever seen in the NBA. It's 6'8", 6'9", 250, 260, 270, whatever his real weight is. He's probably a guy that can play all five positions in today's NBA game. Bigger, faster, stronger than anybody else. I mean, what more can you say? He also took NBA teams. He also led NBA teams to 8 straight NBA Finals appearances. Didn't win them all, but 8 straight NBA Finals. That hasn't been done since the days of the late Bill Russell, right? He's done everything you can do in this league. All-star MVPs. He's led the league in assists. He's led the league in scoring. I think he's 1 or 2 seasons there. Averaged 30 points per game. Averaged 10 assists per game. MVPs. He's got 4 of those. All-star game MVPs. He's got another 3 of those. All NBA teams. All NBA defensive teams. I mean, the guy's resume is like a scroll. But the fact that he hits all the criteria of an all-around player, making his teammates better, doing it on both ends of the floor, winning, right? Changing the game a little bit, not in the same ways that some of the other players have, but he's arguably the best player of his generation. And because he's been around for such a long time, I can see that as an argument for making LeBron James as the GOAT. If someone was to come and say, oh, LeBron's the GOAT, I wouldn't say that's a bad pick, obviously. Just make a good argument. And I'll say that for any of these guys, right? Any of the guys that we've mentioned, I wouldn't say, okay, that's a bad pick, but make your argument, right? So that to me is what the argument for LeBron James being the GOAT. Now let's shift over to the second guy. We're going in alphabetical order. LeBron, L becomes before M, and we'll go to Michael Jordan. So Montana, if somebody comes to you and says, well, Michael Jordan's the greatest of all time, what makes Michael Jordan the greatest of all time, assuming that's the way you go?
I mean, one of the biggest things that he did was win. That's really all Jordan cared about, was winning. And the fact that he could go and win as consistently as he did, especially in the 90s. People forget how, and of course I wasn't around to see this, but I've watched plenty of games on YouTube and plenty of, clips. The 90s NBA is different. The 80s is when the NBA really woke up and we had those guys headline it and, bring it back. But the 90s is where it was at. And Michael Jordan, still thinking about LeBron, I guess. No, Michael Jordan was doing what a lot of teams were unable to do in that era, which was just win consistently. Obviously, never lost in the finals. And that statistic right there is a huge thing you'll hear those talking heads talk about, is he never lost in the finals. I do agree that is great. That is a statistic that a lot of players, and I don't think we'll ever see another player make it to that many finals and win all of them. I just do not think we will see that kind of dominance again, that kind of consistency. We may see another player win 6+, but I do not think they will make 6, win 6. I think they could make 8, win 6, but I don't think we're going to see another player be perfect like we saw Michael Jordan be. Another thing about Michael Jordan is he's the only player to be a 10-time scoring champ in history. That shows that even though he was not putting up huge numbers that put him at, number one in the scoring list all time, he is the only person to score like he scored. He would score regular season and postseason and dominate like it was nothing. There was nobody that could outscore him, especially when it came to postseason play. Another statistic, arguably the one that shows just how insane he was in the postseason, is the 270 opponents that he faced head to head in the playoffs. Only one outmatched him statistically. There was only one opponent that he went head to head in the playoffs that ever outmatched him statistically. That statistic is insane. You will never see even a player like, Kevin Durant. He has been outmatched in the playoffs. Michael Jordan was only outmatched by one player. And that statistic in and of itself is ridiculous because, we've also heard the argument against Jordan, like, oh, he was going up against plumbers, McDonald's workers. He was not. People forget how consistent and how aggressive that basketball was in the 90s. And so when people throw that argument out, it really it's not an argument at all. Michael Jordan was going up against Charles Barkley. He was going up against Karl Malone. He was going to, if you want to discredit the regular season, some of the players he went up against, that's fine. But when it came to the playoffs, especially the finals, he was not going up against plumbers and McDonald's workers. He was going up against NBA legends and a lot of NBA legends that some people would consider in that top 100 list. So Jordan was going up against the best of the best and could just not be beat. He also has the most trophies in NBA history between all the different kinds of trophies there are. He's got a whole different array of trophies. We've seen him, defensive player of the year, MVP, finals MVP. I mean, he's got the most between finals MVPs and regular season MVPs combined. The amount of things this man accomplished, statistics aside, because yes, he's a great player statistically, but what he did when it came to winning awards and winning championships is unmatched. I don't think we will ever see a player be as consistent and as driven as Michael Jordan. We saw one other, but that would be Kobe Bryant. And you see some of the way he played, and it was pretty similar to Jordan in a lot of ways, especially in his younger days. So Jordan was just the best. There was nobody, he was a 3-time steal leader. That shows that he was both sides of the ball, 2-time minute leader. The amount of things he has, the list goes on and on. We talk about LeBron and his scroll of accolades, but Jordan is right up there with him with that scroll. I mean, it is just the things these two men accomplished are
sure
ridiculous, and that's why they're up here is because of those things. But to me, Jordan was a winner, and I think that looks pretty darn good when we're talking about who we think the greatest of all time is, because when we're talking about who was the player that could get it done and that could win no matter what, that would be Jordan. We saw it time in and time out, and it didn't matter who he was playing against. He was the best on the court whenever he was on the court. So I think that's a huge thing for him, and he could hoop, he could score, he could do it all. People seem to just kind of look at him and think about him like the player that just won 6 rings. That's kind of what the argument against him is. People just look at him like, he had great teams, he had all that help. LeBron did it with no help, this and that. But Jordan came to that Bulls team when they were nothing. They were not a great team when he came there. And that team was built around him. He came there on a fine team, but it wasn't anything special. They were not an NBA champion team when he got there. And then when he left there, his last season, they were an NBA championship team and an NBA championship dynasty. So Jordan's impact was insane. And to be 6 for 6, that's a huge thing right there. And I think that between that, and the fact that only one opponent outmatched him in the playoffs, those two things in and of itself just put him a step above the rest for me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said there, Montana. I mean, I'll take it a step further as, we're talking about it. Everybody talks about the 6 rings. Michael Jordan talks about the 6 rings, but he didn't just win 6 rings. I mean, I don't want to downplay 6 championships, which are more than a lot of the guys that we mentioned, same as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Granted, no one's touching Bill Russell's 11, but not only did he win 6 rings, he's got 5 MVPs. He's got 6 finals MVPs, right? He's got 10 scoring titles. He's led the league in steals. He is I think he's the only player in NBA history to win a scoring title and a defensive player of the year award in the same season. In fact, I believe he won the MVP and Defensive Player in the award in that same season. He's only one of a handful of guys that do that. Most recently, Giannis Antetokounmpo. So a scoring title, MVP, and the NBA Defensive Player. Are you kidding me? Yeah, all in the same season. What I talked about LeBron James, like, him taking Cleveland of all teams to the NBA championship. That's the way the Chicago Bulls franchise was looked at before LeBron James got there too. And you mentioned that if anybody on here can name 6 players in the 84-85 Chicago Bulls roster without Googling it, I'd be very impressed. A lot of those teams, even the early years, everybody likes to knock Jordan for getting, knocked out in the first round. He didn't have any help. Other than Charles Oakley as a rookie in 85-86, he didn't, before Scottie Pippen, before Horace Grant, before they built a team around him, which before everybody, pipes up for LeBron didn't have anybody either, and they built a team around him as well. Or he went and joined teams, but I'll get to that in a second. Michael Jordan was the only reason the Bulls were in those games. He willed the Bulls to a lot of those wins, even before 91, their first championship run. They ran into the Pistons a couple times. They're the only barrier going up against getting the NBA Finals for him. The guy was a top scorer. Last time I checked, the object of basketball is to score more points than your opponent. Nobody did that better than Michael Jordan. And he did it in an era where it was tougher to score. You had a more physical game. You had the Pistons coming out with the Jordan rules. He would be double and triple teamed. Granted, Kobe Bryant was too. But every NBA team knew what was coming with Michael Jordan, and they couldn't stop him. That's how great he was. You had a guy like Larry Bird, who's in our top 10 NBA player discussion, one of the guys that we mentioned, probably, one of the top 10 guys that would receive, if you will, GOAT votes, right? He once said that Michael Jordan was God disguised as Michael Jordan. That's high praise coming from a high player like that as well. What other accolades can I give you guys? He could make his teammates better. He wasn't famous for doing that, but it doesn't mean that he couldn't do that. John Paxson got a name for that in the 91 finals, especially in the fourth quarter when Jordan was getting double and triple teamed by the Lakers. Phil Jackson challenged him. Okay, what are you going to do, Michael? Who's open? And he made the correct play. He passed out to John Paxson. People forget that Michael Jordan averaged 10 assists per game over the course of an NBA Finals. He had 20-some triple doubles, which back in the 90s seemed like a lot. It's nothing today. Guys get that in a season, it seems like. But he did have the ability to rebound and pass. In fact, when he had to play point guard for about 11-game stretch in the late 80s, early 90s, he had triple doubles in 10 of 11 games, including 8 straight games with a triple double. In an era where big men filled up the lanes and weren't letting guards get to the boards and get double-digit rebound games, Jordan was doing that. Even his biggest weakness, outside shooting, towards the last few years of his career, Michael Jordan proved that. He developed his game from being an athletic, drive to the basket every single time guy to I'll drive sometimes, and then develop this low post turnaround jumper, which was just as lethal as any other weapon that anybody in the NBA had done, a la Kareem Skyhook. Now, granted, Kareem Skyhook probably was a little bit more lethal, but I don't know a lot of guys that were able to defend Michael Jordan's turnaround fadeaway jumper there. There's some teams that Michael Jordan led that weren't very, we'll say, sexy, right? Let's look at his final year with the Bulls. Scottie Pippen was out half the year. Dennis Rodman was basically AWOL for half the year. Even when AWOL would go to Las Vegas, if you guys remember from The Last Dance. Michael Jordan single-handedly got that team through the regular season until Pippen got back, until Rodman decided he wanted to come back and play. And even in the playoffs, that wasn't the same Bulls teams that you saw won the other 5 championships. In fact, in Game 6, the Game 6 clinching win in Utah, Michael Jordan single-handedly carried that Bulls team. Scottie Pippen barely contributed with a bad back. Dennis Rodman was too busy, getting tangled up with Karl Malone all the time. Michael Jordan got that Bulls team their 6th championship. So, the arguments for LeBron, taking these teams with scrubs to the finals, good arguments, but it's not like Michael Jordan didn't do that. So both of these guys did similar things. It's like, who did more of what? So that would be my main arguments for, and Michael Jordan was, I don't have the numbers in front of me, how many times he was on the all defensive team. I think he was more than LeBron. I think he doubled up LeBron, NBA all defensive team. I think it was something around 12. I forgot about the exact number, to LeBron's 5 or 6, but Just throwing that out there. He was dominant on both ends of the floor. He had a nickname in the league, Black Cat, because he was that quick to be able to get in the passing lanes. Had seasons where he had 100+ blocks and 100+ steals in the same season, including his Defensive Player of the Year season. So a lot of different things. He hits all the categories, and he had the clutch gene. When Michael Jordan was playing, there wasn't anybody you feared more at the end of the game than you did with Michael Jordan with the ball in his hands. And most of the time, he delivered, especially in that Game 6 in Utah. So that's my argument for Michael Jordan as the GOAT. So now we've hit the guys that are most commonly debated. But now, Montana, let's give our picks, our individual picks for the GOAT and why. So by all means, I'll let you go first.
All right, so I'm gonna have to say I was going through those top two guys, and obviously, definitely deserving of being in the conversation. By far the most talked about, but I'm gonna have to go with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think that I know I kind of was critical and said that he lacked certain aspects of his offensive game, but what we also have to remember is the three-point line was not as utilized, especially in his earlier days. It wasn't something that was considered. It wasn't something in college. He didn't even have a three-point line. So the three-point line aspect that I brought up and lacking that certain, part of the game, it also was sort of an era difference as well. And the fact that that man is the number one scorer in NBA history and only shot one three-pointer. Just imagine when he did, just imagine that. That's just something that is mind-blowing. So, but obviously we don't want to look at the what ifs, we want to look at the stats and the facts. And that man was a 6-time champion, a 6-time MVP, a 2-time scoring champion, 1-time rebound leader, 4-time block leader, 19-time All-Star, 15-time All-NBA select. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on and on. That man had accomplished legitimately everything. And I want to give my main reason that I put him above LeBron and above Jordan, and my main reason that I put him above those guys, and it's not by a lot. They're here. He's like right there. He's just a little bit above them. He's not way up here. He's just right above them. The reason to me he's right above them is not only did he accomplish the winning side, the accolades, like I mentioned, just a small portion of what he accomplished. He's accomplished way more than what I could even mention, but he accomplished that. And then he also won 6 NBA championships. And yes, he went to the NBA finals more than 6 times, but he did not go that many more times than 6. I believe he went 8 times. So out of 8 times, he won 6 championships. And those statistics are pretty solid. And I might be wrong. It might have been more like 10, but it wasn't more than 10. Yeah. I don't think it was more than 10 finals appearances. So that man, in my opinion, not only is the most underrated person on that list, in my opinion, he also is the GOAT because he accomplished the stats and the accolades. And that's not saying LeBron James and Jordan didn't accomplish both, but Kareem is just a little step above. And that scoring title is one of those biggest. That's that biggest thing to me is how long that has stood. The fact that no player has gotten that yet is it's a crazy stat, and no one thought that was ever going to be broken. But it's just the fact that it has stood that long just shows the greatness of Kareem. So I've got to give my GOAT pick to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So no disrespect to those other picks because, again, Jordan and LeBron are just right below him for me. But I've got to give it to Kareem.
Okay. A solid pick. I mean, you make a good argument there. Like I said, any of these guys that we talk about, I don't necessarily would dismiss them or say that's a bad pick because these guys are in the top 10 as far as your top 10 best players in the NBA. I don't know if Kareem's in the majority in that vote, but you make a good argument. For me, I know we talked about it before. We've had some comments here about, guys that have changed the game. That's only one part of being a GOAT, right? Steph Curry, Montana, you're getting the Smoke's not going to like my comments either here. And I see you're bringing Smoke. You're talking about Steph Curry changing the game, which you're 100% right, the greatest shooter of all time. But does he do everything else better than some of the other guys on this list? By far, Steph Curry is the best shooter. Bill Russell's the greatest winner. We already talked about that. But does he do a lot of the same things? Can he handle the ball? Was he an outside shooter? Things of that nature. Wilt Chamberlain, dominant, and has the second highest points per game average in the history of the game. Him and Shaq are the most dominant for me. LeBron James, I said it again, will go down having the best statistics of anybody's career that's played in the NBA, for sure. For me, and this is probably not a surprise to most that follow the show, but for me, the greatest of all time is Michael Jeffrey Jordan. And here's why. I put him, for me, it's Jordan and LeBron, and the gap is not very big. Now, if LeBron comes out, let me take a step back. They're 6-0 versus 4-6. A lot of people argue, well, hey, he went to the finals more times than Michael Jordan. He had more chances to win. He took teams that were lesser teams to the NBA finals. Great, but it's not all about participation. You don't get a participation trophy if you lose the NBA finals. You got to win. If you're going to be the greatest, you're not supposed to lose. Not saying you never lose, but he's lost more than he's won there. To me, 6-0 is greater than 4-6. No doubt about it. And again, this isn't to rip LeBron James or any of the guys that we're mentioning here. I just think Jordan did everything better. Yes, Jeffrey was his middle name. That's right. Michael Jeffrey Jordan. He was a better scorer. I think Jordan was a better defender. And most importantly, the man was a better competitor. If I had to pick one person, and this is a life or death situation, to win me an NBA game in their prime, am I taking Michael Jordan or am I taking LeBron James? That's where it came down to for me. And I think Jordan has more of that dog in him, right? We talked about that a few times. He's more of that competitor. Not saying that LeBron James doesn't compete. Of course he competes, and of course he's out there to win. But Jordan would do whatever it took and dig that little much deeper in order to win. I mean, Michael Jordan competed for slam dunk titles. Something as simple as a slam dunk competition at All-Star Weekend. You kept hearing rumors about LeBron James doing it, and LeBron James probably easily would have won. But why did he never compete in a slam dunk competition, right? You don't see LeBron James winning an NBA Defensive Player of the Year. Granted, I get the writers vote for that, but maybe enough of the writers see something there, right, to have that done. I think the total body of work that Michael Jordan has done, and granted, we'll even talk about the Wizards, and I don't even think that was a black eye in his career. Granted, he came back after being out for 3 seasons and was still an all-star caliber player. Granted, if LeBron James keeps playing and stays healthy, he'll probably pass Jordan up in some of those records. An oldest guy to do this, oldest guy, which Jamal Crawford is the oldest to score 50 in a game, barely. But LeBron James might get those records one day. But as we sit here today, even when LeBron James passes up Kareem for most points, that's when we talk about statistics being taken out of context. You got to look at the per game averages. Michael Jordan played 15 years in the NBA. LeBron James is going on year 20. Was LeBron James more efficient? Sure. But Jordan gave you more at the same time per game as well. Never took plays off. Jordan also was one that played 82 games in almost every season, other than his second year when he's out with a broken foot, or if he was suspended for a game for, I don't know, I think fighting Vernon Maxwell, for example, I think was 1 year, or in Reggie Miller and things of that nature. But I think just, that competitive nature, to me, it was Michael Jordan. I put Michael Jordan as my GOAT today. It's not to say that LeBron James can never be the GOAT, because that wouldn't be right. If LeBron James, for me, for LeBron James to be the GOAT, it's got to be like Tom Brady when he overtook Peyton Manning and some of those other great NFL quarterbacks. When he won that much more, there was no way you can dispute Tom Brady being the GOAT. At least most people consider Tom Brady as the GOAT. If LeBron James wins those 2 more championships, at least, then you really can't argue. He's got all the stats. He's got the wins. He's got more finals. He's right there with Jordan and rings. Then I think he can be the GOAT. But today, I still have Michael.
And that's honest. I mean, that's a solid pick. That, to me, if I was listing those guys in order, I would have Kareem, and second would be Michael, and third would be LeBron. And again, I think the thing that we need to remember is LeBron isn't done yet. Like you said, LeBron still has time. My only thinking is if LeBron is more concerned about the legacy, finishing with playing with his son, then he might not be as focused on winning more championships. And as of now, he's made it. Again, as a Lakers fan, I'm not a LeBron fan, I'm a Lakers fan. Some of his commitment to other things such as Space Jam 2 and other stuff, it doesn't really seem like he's as focused as he was when he was a Cav. And again, it's because of where he's at as a player. He has accomplished all this stuff. He is just trying to enjoy himself and get in that Hollywood scene.
Good for him.
I agree. Great for him. It's just we don't know what to expect from these last few. We don't even know how many seasons he's going to play. I give him at least 4. I can see him in for another 4, but I would definitely say that I think that LeBron isn't done yet, and that's why we can't quite count him out completely yet, because he's the one player that still has more to do. He's the one that can still get more done. So that's the thing with LeBron. He could be up there for both of us eventually.
Yeah. I mean, he's the only guy in the conversation that still has a chance to control his own destiny and be able to add on to his legacy and his career. And, you mentioned Space Jam too. I mean, Michael Jordan did Space Jam. Michael Jordan was a businessman with his Jordan line as well. So it's not like Jordan wasn't distracted either. However, now granted, my preference is Space Jam 1. I didn't particularly like Space Jam 2 as much as Space Jam 1. So that's another reason Jordan's the GOAT for me. But anyway, a couple things I forgot to mention on the Jordan versus LeBron for me. Jordan did have help. So did LeBron, though. Jordan had Scottie Pippen. He had Horace Grant. He made John Paxson a household name with John Paxson's clutch shooting in the 91 finals, and then the shot against Phoenix in 93. He made Steve Kerr a household name by passing the ball in 97 in Game 6 and Kerr hitting that wide open shot. Right. So yes, he had help. He had shooters. But other than, and I forgot Dennis Rodman, another NBA all-time 75 guy. Right. But you go back to LeBron. The argument that LeBron didn't have any help is garbage. LeBron joined a team with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh in their prime, and they won. They won 2 chips. He then got teamed up with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love and got a championship. Those are 2 all-stars. And they surrounded LeBron James. Smart GMs will do this with LeBron James. Surround him with shooters. Your James Jones, your Kyle Korvers of the world, guys like that. Then same thing with LA. Anthony Davis is no scrub. He's an all NBA all-star player. So I think LeBron James had more help in getting him where he's at and winning than Michael Jordan did. So that dismisses the argument for me. But we can go on for days on this. But as of today, those are our GOAT picks. Curious to see what everybody else's GOAT pick is. Leave it in the comments here as we come here to a close on episode number 15, if you can believe it, Montana, of Well Beyond the Arc. And this isn't the only program where you can find us. Montana, let's talk just about your other podcast and how that's coming along.
Yeah, definitely. So I have a show called The Connor and Heffernan Show. We're currently on Podbean, Spotify, and Amazon Music. We have been taking a break, but there's about 6 episodes up you can find on any of those platforms. Then I'm also in the process of beginning that Lakers podcast. I don't know if I'm going to get it started before the season gets started, but I'm trying to get that thing started, and I'll plug that once that's available. So right now you can find those episodes on Spotify, Podbean, and Amazon Music, and then maybe something new in the near future.
All right, yeah, be sure to check those out. And also be sure to check out my website. It's called thesportspageblog.com. Been blogging for, almost a year now. It's probably been about 9-10 months. Just released my latest blog on the top 10 most disrespectful dunks from 2000 to 2009. There's even a little Family Guy flair to it, so be sure to check it out. Again, thesportspageblog.com. Blogs, trivia, and you can also find all the links to this here podcast on YouTube, Well Beyond the Arc. And also, again, don't forget to subscribe to the Yankee and the Brit. Be sure to check out the other shows, especially with the NFL here in training camp and the season just around the corner. Also have a great MMA show coming up for you tonight at 9 p.m., so please be sure to check it out. All right, well, thanks again for watching, everyone. We'll catch you next time, and leave your GOAT picks in the comments. Tell us if we got it right. Tell us if we got it wrong, but those are our GOATs, and we're sticking to it. See you.